welcome to the Push-Pull Sales and Marketing Podcast. I'm Marcello.
And I'm Sherry, and each episode will provide you with sales and marketing strategies that you can implement immediately into your own business. Today, Marcello is speaking with Coyte Cooper, who is a speaker, coach, and an Amazon bestselling author, as well as being a world-class athlete. They talk about some of the life lessons that Coyte has learned through wrestling and how he made the leap from being a professor of marketing at UNC Chapel Hill to having a thriving business today. His most recent book is Make Your Mark, and you can grab that if you go to pushpullsales.com/makeyourmark. You can use our affiliate link to pick up his book, and it outlines how you can achieve massive success and get to the next level instead of just drifting from thing to thing without a lot of purpose and energy. So that's kind of the brief synopsis, and I'll let them take over from here.
All right, so we have Dr. Coyte Cooper, Amazon best-selling author of the new book, Make Your Mark. I believe that this is, now, Coyte, is this your second or is this your third book?
Second book, man. Working on my third, but just only got second to this point.
Second book. First book was called Impressions.
Yes.
And the second book here is Make Your Mark. So go ahead, Coyte. I had the opportunity to meet you a couple weeks ago. You were at the Pennsylvania Wrestling Coaches Association, and it's kind of funny. Like, as soon as I heard you talk, I looked over and I'm like, he's going to be on my podcast. And they're like, oh, well, did you ask him yet? I'm like, no, I just know he's going to be. He's awesome. I have to get him on it. It's just a matter of working out all the logistics. So, as soon as I heard him, like, yep, he has to be on. So go ahead, Coyte. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, your background?
Yeah, man. And first, I'm glad you reached out, and it was cool getting to visit with you, and honored to be on the podcast. So I'll start with that, and just in terms about myself, I go kind of a ways back. I was born in Alaska. Something unique about me, and my mom had 19 brothers and sisters, and they adopted 4 more. So I literally have hundreds of cousins up in Alaska.
Wow.
I actually, it's crazy. And I actually grew up. My parents moved me to Washington State when I was pretty young, but I would go up every summer, and I would fish with my dad. He was a commercial fisherman, so like the deadliest catch type stuff, he did that. And every summer I would go up there and I would do salmon fishing. And the reason I bring that up is I look back on my life and I think, how does a lot of who I am come to fruition? And a lot of it was when I was very young, watching my dad as a fisherman, and he just was unbelievably just worked so hard. And I watched him, and I still remember, I would tell people this, there were times where I would be on the boat when I got a little bit older, maybe my younger teenage years, and we would be out fishing. And when other people were not necessarily catching fish, they would like go in and shower, and my dad would keep fishing, and he'd put his net out, which is what you had to do to catch fish, and you would close it up, and all that would take about an hour. You'd try to get fish, and there'd be jellyfish, it'd be windy, I mean, it would be miserable. And he kept making these sets, and I never understood it, but he kept doing it, and he kept working, and eventually he caught fish. And I learned that work ethic, that when you want to be great at something, you have to put that in. And that doesn't mean there weren't times he was smart, but man, he worked for it. He learned from repetition. He got better. And that really impacted my work ethic. At a really young age, I got involved in the sport of wrestling, mainly because I was really kind of crazy. And my dad always tells a story about me where he says he remembers one time he was up on the roof, and I was probably about 5 years old, and he was just up there working, and he looked across the yard, and I was on my bike, and he knew I was going to do something. And my dad would just let me kind of sort things out. And he said, it's crazy. And he said he watched me ride the bike across the yard, and at the end there's a 4-foot drop off, and I go flying and I tumble over, and this time I don't get hurt. My dad comes over, he goes, Coyte, he says, what were you doing? And I said, I just wanted to see what would happen. And the problem with that philosophy is you get hurt a lot. I went to the emergency room a lot. Like I fractured my skull when I was 2. I went to the emergency multiple times by the time I was 5, and finally they're like, we got to do something with this kid. And so they got me involved in wrestling, and I just loved it. And I told people it could have been other sports, which I did get involved with, and I did do a lot of others, but it really stuck with wrestling. And wrestling and being involved in sport taught me so many lessons, about goal setting. I remember when I was 6 years old, a year after I'd been wrestling, I wanted to be a state champ, and I worked for that. And I wanted to, going into high school, I wanted to be a 4-time state champ. And then I wanted to be an All-American in college. And I learned about goal setting. I learned about what it took. I learned about adversity. When you fall flat, what do you do with that? And a lot of that led me on to going to college at Indiana University, where I wrestled for 5 years. I redshirted. And when I got done there, I was an All-American my last year. But I'll kind of get through this a little bit quicker because I want to get to the other questions. But I always thought I wanted to teach, and work with people. Like that's something I've always known. From the time I was in high school, I knew I loved working with people. And so I thought I would be a coach at the high school level and teacher. But when I got done with wrestling, for some reason, I wanted to go back to school. And just to make it a little bit quicker story, I finally had an opportunity to get my PhD. And I thought, gosh, maybe I can go and be a professor. I could teach. I can do research that will help the sport of wrestling and help sports programs. And that led me into becoming a college professor, which I did for 9 years, and then just kind of recently made a shift to doing what I'm doing now. So that's kind of the journey in a nutshell. It's been a lot of really cool things, some adversity in there, but all of it's kind of led me to the point where I am today.
That is too funny. So you mentioned wrestling, and I was just at the National Wrestling Coaches Association, and the one thing I'm not sure if it was Mike. Yeah, I think it was Mike. He's like, for some reason, people have this perception about wrestlers that like all wrestlers are crazy. The first thing you said is I was crazy. So my parents, they I definitely I had to be thrown into something. So you made a transition. So you were a college professor. You got your PhD. Now I do know a lot of your background. So you're working with the wrestling team, and was that at UNC?
Well, I had done more, like even before that, when I was at West Virginia University before UNC, which would have been, 8 years ago now. I had reached out to Mike and said, hey, is there anything I can do? And he said, well, so we're trying to make some decisions on rules. Anyway, you can do some research. And I did some research at the national duels, and that quickly led into, can you do some presentations at the convention, where I started to do them on social media marketing and branding, and that just led to a lot more. And so from that point, just not only working kind of close to home, but with a lot of programs across the country, we did these presentations at the convention, which I didn't know how coaches would respond. Coaches are very much into what they do, but we wanted to present them with, hey, you can grow your program. You don't have to settle for what you have now. You can go out and you can build support. You can increase the number of people attending, donating. And they responded really, really well. I mean, they went out and did the stuff immediately, and we said, what's the next level thing? And so we formed these like Best of Brand Awards to honor programs across the country, and essentially the ones who are branding themselves on social media, videos, graphics, promotions. And what ended up happening is that went great as well. Like we have over 100 college programs involved. We just started the high school program, and I think we've got 250 with the goal of quickly getting to 5%, which would be 500 of all the programs, and growing that. But yeah, it's given me the opportunity to work with programs all across the country, and that's just been an honor, because a lot of the people that I know has been through that capacity.
Oh yeah, I mean it's kind of funny too. So I was familiar with that. So that was called, or that is called, Elite Level Sports Marketing. And then I remember, like, I just saw it kind of pop up, and then all of a sudden you have, do you know who Matt Valenti is?
Oh yeah, Matt's a good guy.
So all of a sudden on Facebook, Matt is just dropping like all like these like memes, like vote for me, assistant whatever, and all that stuff. And I'm like, man, and he's getting like really creative with them. Like I like that. And, and it was nice because you got people who wouldn't necessarily be involved in wrestling commenting about that. Because obviously if something involves wrestling, I'm probably going to look at it. I'm probably going to view it. But he had a lot of people who weren't in wrestling, and they were getting involved, and they were voting like, yeah, I voted today, I'll vote tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, it's nice how you can kind of create that movement. So from a marketing standpoint, you've definitely developed that actual business, but you've also really marketed yourself. So what exactly are you doing right now? Are you fishing every day?
Yeah, no, my dad told me when I was little. That's so funny you mentioned that, because my dad was great at what he did, but he always told us, he's like, you're not going to fish. He said, you got to go to school and do something different. And so what I'm doing is just recently, last year, I mean, there's more to this story, but essentially I decided to kind of walk away from my job at the University of North Carolina, which was a really good job, great place to work, one of the top public institutions in the United States. But I decided to move away from that to go out and to pursue kind of my goal, my dream of being an entrepreneur in the area of just, working with people and organizations to make them more efficient. And I tell them what I focus on is elevating performance. And my key roles right now, I got kind of 4 things that I do, but they all work together. They're not separate. And so I'm an author. Like I said, I've written 2 books. I'm also a coach. I work with people one-on-one to kind of help them get clear on their goals, improve their performance, get what they want. And then I'm also a speaker. So I've done a lot of traveling the last month. I was in Alaska. I was in Florida. I was in Missouri doing speaking. And then I'm a consultant. So on the consultant side of things, that's more of I work with people in the area of branding. And I don't see that different than what I do with individuals. What we do with programs is we get clear on what their goals are from a branding standpoint, and then we get out and we take a look at values and strategies on how they can build interest. And so everything that I'm doing, I'm just trying to help people get more of what they want. And, there's a process to that. A lot of times people think, oh, yeah, when it comes to building a brand or somebody going out and achieving their goals, like they think there's a lot of luck to that. And while there may be some luck, a lot of times it's just more an intentional approach. And so every day I do a wide range of things, like this morning I had a mastermind call with some Division I wrestling coaches, a Division III wrestling coach, a business person, a professor, who are all in a mastermind course that I do. And essentially that's what we were doing, is trying to help them get clear on goals, help them become more efficient with their time. And it's been really cool to see them get results there. And so just a lot of different things that I do. But at the end of the day, I just want to help people get more of what they want, and in turn, get people that are going out and pursuing, really amazing accomplishments that make the world a better place. So day to day, I do a lot of different things, but it all leads back to impacting people's lives.
That's awesome. Now to kind of backtrack, so in terms of the actual consulting side of things, you kind of alluded to it. So you work a lot with coaches, but you don't work exclusively with coaches. You also work with business people as well. So if someone wants to reach out and says, hey, I'm going to need you to talk to my organization, or hey, I have like a manufacturers association. I want you to come out and I want you to give a presentation, or I want you to kind of train my people. You do that as well, right?
Oh yeah, and there's kind of some key areas like that I really special on there, and one is just branding in general. How do you build a brand in terms of values, getting your culture right, getting to the point where you're building the right types of energy. So there's more general presentations like that. But another element that I've found that not only sport organizations but businesses like is personal branding. So getting people more aware of their values, how they want to be perceived, having that align really well with the organization. And those presentations I've actually done before together. And then the last one is just talking more about social media. How do you use that effectively to build energy around what you're doing? How can you stand out in a unique way? Because that's what it takes now. If you don't stand out on social media, people drown you out. So those things I think all fit together. But yeah, I do presentations on those things. Recently, I was at H.H. Gregg in Indianapolis doing a talk on goal setting and some branding as well. But yeah, I do a lot of that in terms of just presenting, but also kind of breaking it down and doing kind of more seminars and things like that as well.
That's awesome. And it's kind of funny. I saw on LinkedIn today someone had posted about like sales and marketing consultants, and they had like a graph, and it was like 80% are con artists and 20% are actually legit.
Yeah.
You could tell right away you are legit, because in reading your book, you reference Brian Tracy, you reference Darren Hardy, and I've read both his books. You have what was one called The Slight Edge.
Yeah. Jeff Olson. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. What did I say? I said Jeff Hardy.
Oh, Darren Hardy too. He does the compound effect. They're actually really similar. The two of them.
Yeah, I've read both those books, so I've kind of morphed them into one individual in my mind, apparently. So.
Yeah. No, and the crazy thing is, you may not have known this, but they're both Jim Rohn kind of disciples. Like that was their mentor. So they have Jim Rohn has a lot of that in him. Embracing the little things, having that build up. And having that impact your future. So those guys, I think, know each other pretty well. And so their books actually have similar concepts. They're packaged a little bit different, but both, I think, really amazing reads.
Awesome. That is. I mean, again, you could tell right away, and the fact that you knew that, I didn't know that. I mean, you can definitely see similarities between you and Jim Rohn and all those other people. And it's I think if one thing, if it kind of morphs everyone together, it's a lot of self-discipline, and it's a lot of building habits, because I like to think, and I'm not sure if maybe, and it might have been Jim Rohn who said pretty much the most important attribute you can have is actual self-discipline and developing that habit and working that through. And that's really where everything stems from. But you have this like natural like passion about you, and again, that was why, like, as soon as I heard you speak, I'm like, yep, he's on the podcast. That's it. I'm getting him. That, so I'm very, very pumped. So In terms of what you're doing right now, so someone bumps into you, or you have like an elevator speech, or what are some normal questions, or what would you say? What are some normal like issues people are coming to you and say, hey, Coyte, I'm having this problem with my business, or hey, Coyte, I'm having this problem with, I'm trying to get over the hump, I'm trying to get to the next level. What are people asking you?
Yeah, I thought of a few different questions here, and the first one is kind of more from a branding, just building interest. Like I have a lot of people who say, "How do I build interest in what I'm doing?" Whether it's an entrepreneur, whether it's a sports program, whether it's a business, how do you build interest? And a lot of times what I tell them is the thing that I've recognized from being around branding and around programs and around businesses, that it always starts with leadership. It always starts with an individual who has a vision, who focuses on that vision every single day, who's passionate about that vision, and who goes out every single day like crazy, just passionate about getting people on board for the vision. And so it always starts there. So I always tell people, you want to stand out, the first thing you have to do to stand out is to be passionate about what you do. The moment you're passionate about something, you put yourself in a 10% group, because research shows like 90% of people really don't have anything that they're passionate for that they will fight for. So the moment you find that, like you say, gosh, I'm passionate about growing the sport of wrestling, or I'm passionate about going out and growing businesses to where they can build amazing companies. And so I tell people, you have to start there. You have to get to know your vision. You have to know, what drives you. What's the end outcome that you will get up and fight for? Because like what you said a second ago, the discipline piece is really hard. Like most people struggle with discipline. And a lot of times that's because they're trying to do things that they really aren't passionate about. And I tell people, the more I've gotten to do the things that I love, like I love getting up every single day and impacting lives, like it's easier for me to follow through. And so I always tell people there's a lot of strategies of things that you can do on social media in terms of, you have to go into it saying, gosh, I want to be different. You have to be willing to take risks, to, try different graphics, try different videos to see what sticks. But a lot of it starts with just a passion to be different. Another question I get a lot is, how do I build confidence? That's something I hear a lot of, people saying, gosh, how do I get to the point where I believe I can achieve these things? Because the one thing I preach about is always like going for it, go all in. If there's something that you really want, go for it, because I think this, if you go for something that you love and you fall short, my thought is you can totally live with that. But a lot of people don't have the confidence to do that. And so I work with people in courses, with my book, in terms of, getting them clear about their goals, seeing them every single day, getting action items and building those things into a calendar, and getting to the point where you're taking action. It's because what I tell people is confidence. It goes back to what you said about self-discipline. Confidence is really the ability to, once you know what you want, to do something about it consistently. And if you do something about it consistently, you will eventually get results. You start to get results, you'll start to be more confident. And eventually that will morph into something completely different, which leads into the third question that I get a lot is, how do I overcome fear? And that's a question, whether you're in sales, whether you're in business, it deals with that first part. What I told you is, if you want to get over fear, you have to learn to focus your mind on the right things, meaning focus more on your goals, focus more on taking action. But I also think there's a mental shift that has to take place. A lot of the times when we're afraid a lot of times because we're worried about what it means for us from an ego standpoint. And I know I used to be this way with speaking. I used to get anxiety. And the reason why is I was so worried about what I would look like when I was speaking. And then I learned that I just had to shift my mindset. And what I did is, instead of focusing on what it meant for me, I started to focus on, what can I do to impact lives? How can I go in and make that, make a difference? And the moment I made that shift, like the fear part came away, and I was just grateful, right? I just focused on being grateful for the opportunity to go in and impact people's lives. And the moment I did that, the fear went away. And this was reinforced for me. I interviewed Kyle Snyder, who's an amazing wrestler, like the youngest ever world champ, youngest ever Olympic champ in United States history. And the part that was so profound to me is when he talked about his approach, is he said, I'm not worried about putting, belts around my waist or the money that I get. I just go in and I'm just grateful for the opportunity to get better every single match. And a lot of people say, oh, well, that's BS. It's not. If you go into your day and you're a salesperson and you just say, man, I believe in my product and I'm just grateful for the opportunity to impact people's lives, it's a subtle shift with a profound difference in your approach. You won't worry about failing. Like, you'll be more just saying, gosh, I'm grateful for, even if it's only just, I'm just grateful to get better at what I do. I'm going to fail, but gosh, I'm going to find the lesson. And if you have that mentality, that's what I learned from Brian Tracy. Eventually, gosh, you're going to be really good at sales, and that rejection rate is going to get much better. So those are 3 questions that I get a lot. That I feel like people need to be able to kind of to work with to get better.
Now you touched upon a couple of different things. So the one thing, and again, I'm not sure if either I'm going to have to talk to Gene or Jeff Zanetti. I think Wrestling Mindset might have actually stole that from you, or maybe you got that from someone else. So for their company, Wrestling Mindset, one of their principles is, I'm grateful for the opportunity to wrestle, and they go through the history and they say, well, dojos do it all the time, and in terms of enjoyment and in terms of peak performance and having that actual gratitude, that is huge for anything. And it's kind of funny because you're not really covering anything that is really like earth shattering, and I like to cover this too. I mean, anything that is easy to do is also very easy not to do. And what I like so much about that, and I'm going to ask you to kind of explain it a little bit more in detail, because when you talk about going all in, there's actually 2 ways. So you have a play on words in that. So there's going all in, ALLIN, and then you have
both, yeah.
Olin. Okay, can now, for someone who hasn't read the book, can you kind of explain that a little bit?
Yeah, Olin, that was a book. I read it a while back, and it's this. Gosh, I'm drawing a blank. It will come back to me in just a second. I get this sometimes, but I read this book, and what it talked about was the ability. Olin is an ancient Aztec word, and essentially what it means is to go kind of just to pursue something with all your heart, just to go for it. And so they're not completely different, but the Olin was just one that just has an ancient meaning to it. And what it means is this, like, it's so rare in our society, for people to just have something that, gosh, I really want that, and to go for it. I don't know how many people I meet. It's at least once a week or once every other week of people going, gosh, I would like to write a book. And I'm like, why don't you? And they're like, well, and they just kind of just move around, and they know they should. They really want to, but there's like sort of a fear of failure or falling short or the investment of what it takes. But gosh, what I tell people is, if you find something that you really get excited about and you go, gosh, I would love to do that, I say go. Create a plan and go. And that's maybe one of my greatest assets, but also sometimes hurts me, is that when I have an idea that I like, I go and I learn from repetition and I figure it out. Like when I wrote my first book, I went through and I really wanted to write a book, and getting a publisher is ridiculously hard. Like the rejection rate is really high. A lot of times now you can't even go to the publisher. You have to go to an agent, and the agent's like, you write like 100, I wrote like 150 of them. And I only got like 3 of them to write me back. And it was like, no, thank you. But what it is this: when you want something, you can't let that stop you. And so immediately I got to where I did that for months and months. And finally I said, you know what? I'm not going to let this stop me from doing what I want to do. And I immediately explored independent publishing, where I worked with somebody in a hybrid role, but I went out and said, how can I get a book out? How can I build a platform? How can I start impacting people's life and learn from this process? And I just didn't let those things stop me. And so when it comes to like that all in, it's just your ability to go out and to every single day, like pursue something that you love. And that's what I do every single day. And honestly, one of the reasons why I'm able to do this now is because I didn't do it previously. As a college wrestler, I did not reach my goal. I wanted to be a national champ. I was an All-American one year. But, when you really break it down, I wasn't really, really close to getting to my goal. And I know why. Because I held back. I was afraid of losing. And because I was afraid of losing, I never really fully laid it on the line. And I'm not the type, like, I don't dwell on it. I actually look at that and go, gosh, that was a good lesson for me. Like, I needed that lesson because I was holding back. My mindset was wrong. I was more of a fixed mindset. That's a Carol Dweck term. And what I've changed to now is I'll go for it. I'm okay with failing. Like, I will set lofty goals and I will go for it. And if I fall short, I'm okay with that. I'm going to get better. And so I'm focused on growth. Like, I'll set monster goals, go for it, fall short. I'm just going to recalibrate and go for it again. And so just going all in means, gosh, if you want something, then go. Figure out how to get it. Don't let these little no's stop you. And so no matter what area you're in, you're going to get no's. You're going to get rejection. You're going to get criticism. Don't let it stop you. Keep going for it if it matters a lot to you.
Absolutely, and it's kind of funny too. So you mentioned in terms of that so when you talk about Carol Dweck, and she has a book, and I'm not sure what the name of the book is called, and it's kind of funny because I wasn't familiar with that book. I had so for my company we have two sales meetings a year. The one was in DC, And a lot of it, what you had to do before, and I just started, so I transitioned. I moved on to a different company, and so my first day is actually at a sales meeting, and they talk about growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and I'm like, man, I just read about that in Coyte's book. That is, it's kind of funny how that works out, because you don't have to worry about reading it, you don't have to worry about the actual concept. I just want you to go to the meeting so you can meet a lot of people. And I was like, well, I already have a good idea in terms of what this was, so I was able to actually participate and have a meaningful conversation about that and what the difference is. And it is kind of funny. And you talk about your background in wrestling, and for me, it's kind of the same way. So my college career didn't end anywhere near where I wanted it to be, and I look at that as, hey, that it taught me lessons now that I use in my life, I use in my business that I would have never had in place. So I know exactly what I did wrong, and what wasn't working, and some of the things worried about what other people think and all that good stuff. And you talk about that in your book too. It's not so much that people are going to just, pretty much poo-poo, all over your ideas, and they're not going to be, very, very encouraging. Most of the time what will happen, and I love this quote, and I use this all the time, is you don't need to wait for someone's permission to go ahead and how does the quote go? Don't wait for someone's you
don't need anybody's permission to pursue your goals and dreams or aspirations. That's what I always tell people.
I love that. And in terms of what happens in life, and you talk about that in your book, it's not so much that people are like, yeah, Coyte, that is a really stupid idea. Like, I can't believe like you had a job at a university, you got your doctorate, and you left that. It's more so when you say, I'm going to leave, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to do my own thing. It's people like, oh, okay, that's nice, and you naturally interpret that as negative. Like, it's kind of funny, like how well you can kind of communicate that out, and that's really what happens for a lot of people. And what I love is you talk about that actual passion and kind of getting over fear and being able to go ahead and actually achieve your goals. Because if you have a passion for something, you have everything in place, it makes it a lot easier. Because in terms of doing things and going out and performing from a logical standpoint, in terms of wrestling, like, after wrestling since you were 5 in college, there was probably not a situation in college that you already hadn't gone through hundreds, if not thousands of times. You've been in overtime and you've won, you've came from behind and you've actually won. It's the same thing from a business standpoint. You've given hundreds of presentations, you've spoke to other groups, and you've talked to other people. But for some reason, when you have that fear that's blocking you, you're not able to do what you normally would do, even though logically you have every reason why you would be able to perform. Am I right?
Yeah, you are right. And the one thing I wanted to touch on that I think is really important is that concept of, you're going to go out, if you have a goal, like I tell people, you should tell people that, if the conversation comes up and say, people, what do you want to do in the future? Like, you should put that out there. And a lot of times there's benefits to it. There's accountability that comes, it gets to the point where you'll actually have some people that will help you. But most of the time, what you discussed is you're going to go out and you're going to tell people, gosh, yeah, I want to be a New York Times best-selling author someday. And they're not going to tell you you're dumb or anything like that. They're just not going to say anything. And it's important that you recognize that, and you don't allow that to impact your psychology, because a lot of times what you're doing is when people don't say anything, like it's a passive way of saying, hey, I just don't know what to say. Like, I don't know if you can do that. And, people do it all the time. And the important thing is to just, you don't need that. You don't need anybody to tell you can go for things. If you have it around you, great. But what I always say is, I have these things that I want to do. I do need some permission from my wife. But other than that, other than my wife, like, if somebody tells me you can't, I'm still going for it. And I'll give you one example, and this is the process, right? You have to get to where you see your goals, you move towards them, you believe in them. Because I remember when I was deciding to move away from North Carolina, I called my dad, who's one of my best friends in the world, and he's been so amazing in terms of just supporting me. And when I called him, I said, here's what I think I'm going to do. And he said, Coyte, he says, you have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old at the time. He says, you need to be careful. You know what I mean? Because you have health insurance, you have all your bills and that are paid for, you've got a good job. And I immediately said this to my dad, because I knew he was just trying to look out for me and my kids. I said, Dad, this is happening. Like, I'm doing this, and I need you on board. Like, I just need you on board. And he said, okay. And that was me saying, I'm not looking for permission. I wanted to tell you, I wanted to bounce ideas off him. But you've got to get to the point where you need that, because honestly, I tell people this all the time. If you're looking for permission all the time, you're not going to get it. Because when you set really lofty goals, the type of goals that pull you out of your comfort zone, most people you meet are not doing that. And so when you ask them, even if it's just because they look at it and they feel uncomfortable because they're not doing anything, you're not going to get the response that you want. And if that's what you're looking for, then you're going to sit around waiting all the time. So the all in that I talked about, I just remembered, it would have drove me crazy. It's Kevin Hall, Aspire, that to go all in, you got to go and not worry about it. And so so like you said, the mindset part, getting to the point where you believe in it, that's what you see with high level athletes. You see it with high level entrepreneurs, high level business executives, is they have the skin, right? They have the tough skin to just say, this is where we're going to go. And let's go. Get on board. Let's go. And if people don't believe it, they're okay with kind of cutting themselves away from them. But that's a tough thing to do, too.
That is. Now, one thing I did want to ask, so in terms of asking for permission, because there was one person he did have to ask permission. How did Mrs. Dr. Cooper take it when you're like, you know what, this is what I want to do. I'm going to leave university. I'm going to leave this position, and I'm going to start this. How did your wife take it?
She was great, and I think maybe she believes in me enough and knows that when I say something, I mean it. But I went to her and I said, this is what I want to do. And honestly, there was not like a discussion of, oh, what if this happens or that happens? She honestly said, we'll go do it. And I said, okay, well, that's what I'm going to do. And at the time, like I honestly could have waited like 9 months to tell my boss. Like I could have waited 9 months and still kept that comfort of having a job if I wanted it. Mm-hmm. But I told my wife, I'm going in right away and I'm telling him I don't want it because I want to cut that. I want to burn the bridge. Like if this is what I'm going for, I need that kind of, I don't know if I want to call it pressure, but I need that nudge, right? To know that I've made this decision. I can't turn back. This is what I want. And she was just great. She said, go for it. And she's always been that way. And I do the same thing with her. Something she wants, go for it. And I guess I'm fortunate in that way because a lot of people would say you can't do it because we have to pay our bills and all this and that. But, I told her too. I said, listen, I would rather go out and pursue what I love and fail miserably than stay in a job that I don't want right now and teach my kids that that's what you do. And that's what most people do. And so, this is my message. This is what I talk to people about. I say, hey, you got to go for it. If there's something that you want, put a plan in place, start to move, take action, go get the life that you want. And I had to make that decision because otherwise I'd be a hypocrite, really. And so I had to make that decision, and it's been awesome. I'm not there yet completely, but I'm having some real good results that I'm enjoying. But just have to keep grinding and doing my thing. That
is awesome, and it's kind of funny too. So your wife's response is kind of in stark contrast. So the same day, and in terms of that coaches conference, it kind of resonated with me, and it definitely stuck with me. So when Frank Molinaro was there, and he was talking about walking with his wife, and was like, hey, I think I want to wrestle. And I believe he said, well, the first thing she said was like, but honey, you don't know how to wrestle freestyle, or hey, you're not a freestyle wrestler.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah. So, but again, he went after it, and and pretty much when push comes to shove, I mean, the actual people that are going to be supportive are going to be supportive no matter what. And you need to have that sort of inner circle, and you kind of talked about that earlier. You had a what do you call it? You call it a mastermind group, and having those people around and kind of bouncing off ideas. So, I mean, one thing that I would encourage in terms of anyone is to go ahead and reach out to Coyte and, check out his website. He's got CoyteCooper.com. And then the other one is also, it's the MakeYourMarkBook.com. Because in terms of anyone who's actually trying to achieve something, you have a lot of allies in terms of that. So you've reached out, you've read other books, you've reached out to other people. So everything that you've kind of done and developed in terms of branding and marketing, for you, it sounds to me like you've kind of built this up over years. It's not like you just randomly started doing things. You kind of had a set process in place, and I mean, you obviously you make mistakes along the way, and you kind of figure things out. But regardless, when you set that goal, the actual next step is to find people who are in alliance or find people who can help you and pretty much make a way happen. Am I right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I did. It wasn't reckless. I didn't just cut my ties at the university and have nothing there. I mean, I had some consulting I was doing. I had connections that I knew I could leverage. I had already written a book. I had a good chunk of a second book written. And I just, I believed in my ability to do this. And, it's the craziest thing. And I tell people this all the time, that when your intentions are good, meaning you are following the things you're passionate about in the moment and you go for it, it has a funny way of maybe it doesn't end up the way you thought it would, but it ends up really good. Like when I think about what I'm doing now, I look back and I'm like, all of my skill sets that I've learned. I was a professor in branding. I did research in branding. I created the marketing manual with the NWCA. I work with college coaches. I had to learn graphics. I learned, Adobe products. I learned Final Cut Pro. And then being a college professor, like I learned how to teach, how to break information down, how to engage a really challenging audience and younger individuals. Like all of that came together. And now what I'm doing now, I can do everything I need to do on my own. That doesn't mean I do it, but I can do all of it. And it's so neat how it all comes together. But, even when I made the shift, I still today don't know how to do everything. I struggle with what product do I launch? When I launch it, how exactly am I going to launch that? And I have to put a lot of thought into that. But like you said, I'm willing to try things. I've tried the mastermind group. It's been amazing, and you go in wanting to help people, and clearly you get to do that. But the coolest thing has been what I've learned from being around them. You put together 5 to 6 amazing, like proactive coaches, entrepreneurs, and it's really neat to see them feed off of each other and how much I learn and how much I can guide them. Like I just have learned a ton from that. And that's led me to the next step where I'm going to launch, like in 2017, I'm going to launch some mastermind courses with high level people. And what we're going to do is we're going to take their top goals and we're going to move them through the process. And so it's really neat how when you're willing to step, I look back and all the little things I've done, how they've led me up to the point where I'm ready to not only launch these products, but do my first live event in 2017. And just a willingness to go and do it. And not everything I've done has worked out. Like there's been things that have totally fallen flat that I'm like, gosh, I thought that would work really well. And it didn't. And then sometimes things surprise you. But, when you take action and you're constantly trying to add value, that's a critical element. You have to want to help people. And I think when your intentions are good, all of a sudden these unique opportunities come up. And I've seen that. There's really cool things that are coming up from people who just want to help you. And that's just such a neat part of the process. But if your intentions are wrong, meaning you're just in it for you, I think you miss on some of those benefits.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now, for you especially, it sounds to me, and you do a really good job in terms of marketing, and you do a really good job getting your actual name out there. But if I'm running a business, or if I'm looking to kind of improve my own business, or I'm looking to, maybe I want to reach out to a sports psychologist, or maybe I'm looking to kind of do something different for my organization, for me, I would probably find your information first because you've done a good job kind of covering a lot of space. But if someone were to say like, yeah, Coyte, I only have like one keynote speaker, or I only have like a couple spots available, what would you say sets you apart from your competitors? So other people who are doing something similar to what you're doing right now, what would separate you, Coyte, from everyone else? Why would I want to bring you on board versus anybody else?
Well, I think the first question before I will 100% answer your question, but the first thing I would always ask somebody is, what are you trying to accomplish? And if they told me they were trying to accomplish something that I couldn't, I don't even know if I would try to fight for that. I have to feel like I'm a good fit. Mm-hmm. But what I would say is that what you're going to get from me is somebody who genuinely cares about not just helping people, but drastically transforming people. And I combine that with really good experience in areas, like you said, what differentiates me? I remember reading, a podcast from Tony Robbins, and Tony Robbins is obviously one of the greatest, people working on psychology and performance. He puts 10,000 people at his events, but he talked about when he got started, he said he believes in immersion. When you love something, you dive into it. And he read something like 700 books in a span of 2 years, which is just a phenomenal amount. And what I tell people is what makes me different is I'm not just a motivational speaker in that I'm going to come in and I'm going to get you hyped up, pumped up. I think I can inspire people. Like I believe in my message, and I love what I'm doing so much that I think that will happen. Mm-hmm. But I study, performance a lot every day, every single day for over 2 years straight. I have read at least 30 minutes every single day on mindset, on performance, on goal setting, on all these things that will help people get results. I understand that. I have launch courses where I'm working with people every single day to put this stuff into application. Like I understand, that people, even when they want to go out, they hit mental barriers. And I've had a chance to work with people one-on-one. And I just every single day, I love it. I study it. Like immersion. I do immersion every single day in terms of getting results. And so I can combine that passion with my experience that I've had in branding. And I think I can come into an environment and I can really, really do a presentation that people will remember. And then the final thing is I love presenting. And I don't want this to come across as arrogant, but I really believe that I've been given gifts where I think I can engage an audience. And I've not only feel like I have those gifts, but man, I've worked at it. I was a college professor where for 9 years I worked my butt off trying to engage college students to try to make sure that, of course they had to grind, and I talked to them about that, but I tried to make my classes interactive. I tried to engage them. I tried to make them want to go out and do amazing things with their lives. So I think when I combine all that, I just have a unique skill set, but at the bottom of it is I love what I do. I want to help people get results. And so that means if you hire me, you're going to get somebody who comes in and really puts everything into it. I joke with people. I say when I present, I come in and I use a lot of energy. And I joke, I don't know, like a lot of times some audience haven't seen the movie Old School, but I always laugh. I said Will Ferrell, when he was in that competition where they're answering questions, is he's not very smart. Will Ferrell isn't. And he's sitting there and they're asking him questions, and all of a sudden he has this like out of body experience where he goes crazy and he answers the question and they win, but they're really not smart. As I joke, as I say, that's me when I present. I come in and I have I have, the experience, everything. I just love my message. I have like this out of body experience where I just love what I'm doing. It just all kind of just comes out. And then at the end I'm worn out because I pour everything into it. But I work really hard at what I do, and I'm going to continue working hard at what I do. And another reason is I think I've gotten to the point where as much as I can, I make it about my audience and not about me. And I hope that comes across. But every day,
100%. And that was why, I have to get this guy, is because you can tell that passion, you can tell the energy, and you know where it's coming from. I mean, I've spoke with other people who kind of do things that are kind of similar to what you're doing, or people who are kind of into that. And what they're saying, it doesn't necessarily resonate with how they're saying it. And you could tell, again, and in terms of just sales and marketing in general, if you're coming from a place of wanting to help other people, you're going to be a lot more successful. And it's kind of funny. Yeah. So I was working with the National Wrestling Coaches Association, and they had a gentleman there who, he wasn't he wasn't a wrestler or anything like that, but in terms of his passion and for the position he was in, he never did it before, but he was doing very good at it because he had that passion. He's like, look, I just want to help people. I understand the mission, and I just want to help people with that. And the actual skill set is going to come later. But having the mindset, it was 80% of his job right there. And I'm like, I see why you brought this person on board, because you could tell that right away, and you can see that, and he wants to learn, and he wants to help people. And that resonates 100%. And what you're saying about immersion, you talk about in your books. I like to think in terms of your book, and if you haven't read the book, you have to. You talk about getting reps in. So every day you're getting your reps in. You're reading every day. You're working toward your goal, and you're starting. And you talk about in your book pretty much you have to pick one thing at first, and then you can kind of build habits from there. Because the hardest thing is people pick like 9 or 10 habits, and then they don't follow through with anyone, and they get really discouraged, and then they pretty much stop. But for you, I mean, you kind of build on one habit onto another. Now I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to make this a harder question for you, and you might not even have an answer. What would you say are you the most proud of in terms of maybe helping an individual or helping a company in terms of what you've done? What would you say are you the most proud of, or what is one that kind of resonates with you now in terms of an actual success story of someone who you've helped or someone who you've worked with?
Yeah, and I think 2 come to mind. One where it's been a loose working with, and one closely. I had, when I wrote my first book, Impressions. I wrote the book kind of like, you want to write a book, even some of it is just for you. But I wrote this book, and I don't think I fully connected of what it could mean for people. And I still remember it was maybe 6 months after I got a message on Facebook, and that's not abnormal. You get people who write you, and I try to write everybody back. But I opened this one up, and it blew me away. This woman said that her husband, not long before, had committed suicide, and the book helped her get through it. And my gosh, I mean, to have a message like that, I mean, it just hit me really hard, helping me realize what I could do if I work hard, hone my craft, write books that mean something to other people. That one was probably the most memorable thing that I've ever had. But in terms of results, with my Fundamentals of High Performance course, which I work with people pretty much every month, I had somebody named Olga. And Olga was a connection. Her husband's a wrestling coach, so I got to know her there. But she had been in a career that she walked away from because, the message that we talk about is pursuing the things that she really loves. And she wanted to go into real estate. That always been her goal and her dream. And so we broke it down and said, what's your goal? What do you want in terms of this? She said, I want to be the top salesperson. Here's what it would take. She broke it down with the right habits. And within 2 weeks, she was the top salesperson in her company, and her bosses were like blown away. And I wasn't, because not necessarily because of the process, because she has great energy. She's a really amazing person, but she just followed a process. There's a process to getting results, that when you're clear about your top goal and you can focus your energy on your, sometimes top 1, 2, 3 goals, and you break it down and like the 3 things that will give you the biggest results, and you're disciplined enough to build it in your schedule. And then we had to deal with some psychological barriers, but that process, just writing it down, doing it, moving into things that make you uncomfortable, you get results. And so that was one of the coolest ones, because we took somebody who was just starting, who was struggling a little bit, and then all of a sudden she's the top real estate salesperson in her company. And it was neat too, because she said it was a bunch of, she's one of the females and there's a bunch of males around her. And so and some of them would give her kind of a hard time. And so now all of a sudden she's a top salesperson. So that one was pretty cool for me, just to see the results of what she gets. But I mean, there's a lot that are like that in terms of what it does for their mindset, how they love their lives more, just really neat stuff like that.
That is awesome. So when you were writing the book, I mean, in 2 things. So one, I mean, did you have that vision that you're like, hey, I'm going to save somebody's life, basically, for what you talked about earlier? You always hope that you can do things to help people in that way. But yeah, I mean, you write it going, gosh, if I can get this right, it's going to mean something to somebody at the right time that can change their life. And I think when it's done right, that's why you do it. I mean, you do it because you think you can change people's lives. That's what you get up. I mean, listen, you can get like awards, you can be a best-selling author, you can make money, and that stuff will wear off. What never wears off is getting up knowing that you can change somebody's life, that you can make the world a better place, and that's what it's all about. Yeah. And one thing too, and you touched upon this at the Coaches Association, and for coaches, I mean, it's the same thing if you're a coach or if you're a business leader. You don't know what day is going to be the most important day. So having that high energy all the time is very, very important. And it's kind of funny. So people probably would think like, oh, well, Coyte is like this all the time. He never has an off day, and there's got to be something special about him. And you're, I hate to say you're human. I mean, you are, and you have certain days. But as a coach and as a business leader, as a sales leader, it's important to remember that you're not sure what day or when that message, when it actually might resonate. But it's important to have that, to be all in all the time and really, really commit that. To kind of transition that, I do want to ask you, aside from your own resources, if you had to give our listeners any kind of resource, it could be a book, it could be an app, it could be a course, what would you recommend for our listeners in terms of maybe, getting more information on maybe marketing or branding or what would be a good resource for them?
Well, I think a guy who's really good at marketing, who's launched multi-million-dollar campaigns, who also does a lot of like psychology and performance. A guy named Brendon Burchard is a guy who's impacted me a lot, and he has a podcast called The Charged Life. It's one of the top podcasts on iTunes, and a lot of that's just who he is. I mean, he works with high-level CEOs and coaching Olympians. He's amazing, and so I'd recommend that. Tony Robbins has a newer podcast where I've listened to some of the episodes, and I think he's amazing. Like, he's definitely different, outside the box, a little bit nuts sometimes, but gosh, I mean, the stuff that he does is pretty incredible. So Tony Robbins' new podcast, you can just search him. Mm-hmm. And then books. I mean, those guys, I would read their books, but there's a guy who I really like. His name is Andy Andrews. For people who like reading story-type books, like ones where you don't feel like you have to work and you get the lessons, Andy Andrews has some. There's one that's called The Traveler's Gift that he's written.
Traveler's Gift. Okay.
Yeah, that's an amazing book. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho is a similar one, which is a really neat book. And then The Go-Giver, I think it's Bob Burchard, I think is what it is. But those are some like story type books. Like sometimes you're going into the holidays, you're traveling, and it is important that you get some downtime. Like you can't go all the time hard. Like you have to take some downtime. And so if you're traveling and you still want to get something in, but you want it to be kind of more relaxed, those are amazing books for that. So those are things I would recommend.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. So you mentioned Brendon. So his last book, The Motivation Manifesto, his book, it's like the way it's written, and it's kind of funny. I had someone else in terms of like readability and stuff like that. The way it's written, it does feel like it is a little bit more work. And I'm sure you've read his book. Like it's definitely a little bit higher up academically in terms of the verbiage and stuff like that. And I kind of get the whole aura he's going with, but you do bring up a valid point. You know, sometimes, and again, in terms of having a plan and actually decompressing and taking some time off, you know, having those stories, it is important to balance that, you know, and having that in place. So it's kind of funny you mentioned them. You mentioned them both. Now, if someone wants to find you, we're gonna have links and show notes and pretty much and all that good stuff. What would be the best way? I mean, is it Twitter? Is it your website? What would be the best way for someone who wants to reach out and say, "Man, Coyte, how am I going to get hold of this guy?"
Yeah, if you just want to learn more about kind of what I do, like the podcast is on there, you know, my speaking is on there, my contacts on there. You can kind of get everything in one place at CoyteCooper.com. It's CoyteCooper.com. You can get all that.
And it's not Coyote, because
it's not Coyote. No.
When I was texting you, like my phone's like, I'm like,
it wants it to be Coyote.
It wants you so
it really
bad to
does.
be Coyote. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so no, you can get a lot of it on there, and there are actually links on there where you can click easily to my social media. But in terms of Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, I'm posting regularly on there. Just my name, Coyte Cooper. You can find me on there. So those are the best ways, and you can pick up the new book on Amazon by just searching Coyte Cooper and make your mark on there.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have links to all that, and then also we're gonna have a link to your other book as well.
Cool.
So wrapping things up, do you have any final thoughts for listeners and any kind of words of wisdom or anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, I'll keep it pretty concise. But the one thing I've learned from working with people is that all people want some more of something in their lives. I've never met somebody who doesn't want more success, you know, more outcomes, more time with their family. There's always something that they want more of. I think that's human nature, and you have to get to the point where you start to have success where you appreciate that. But there's a process to getting that. If you want to be able to achieve more, you totally can. And what most people do is they undersell what they're able to accomplish. And so the best thing that I could tell people is if there's something you want more of, go try to get it. You know, do everything that you can to make that happen. Because at the end of the day, if you get in the habit of settling, whether it's in business, whether it's with your family, if you get in the habit of settling for average and status quo your entire life, and what that is it's not a, gosh, I'm trying to be crappy. This is just if you get to the point where you go, you know, I just kind of okay with my life and I'm trying kind of hard, that what I know is this: you're at some point going to get into your life and you go, gosh, I didn't use it up, and you're going to feel it. Or you're going to get to the end of your life and you're going to regret it. And while you may fail going for it, you will never regret going and writing that book. Even if you'll never regret that, like going for it. And that's what I tell people is to just go out, try to pursue the things that you love, and change the way you see failure. And that's one of the things that I talk about in the book is like, failure is not what you think it is. It's not, gosh, I'm so terrible and I'm a failure. No, it's just a part of the process. You have to learn to embrace that. But if you're willing to embrace it, you'll set your goals, you go for it, you fail, you get back up, you're tougher than most people in society, and you're willing to grind for that, eventually you're going to get to a point where you love your life. And I think that's what it's all about. If you don't love your life, then do something about it. I get up every single day, and I love what I do every single day. And my wife would tell you that I am. Every day I love it. And that's what I want to teach people to do.
That is awesome. So we had a great discussion. Again, I'll have links to everything. Really appreciate hanging out with Dr. Cooper today. We'll have links to everything, show notes, and all that good stuff. But again, Coyte, thank you so much.
I love it, man. Thank you so much for visiting with me, and best of luck with everything.
So that wraps things up for the week. Thanks again to Coyte Cooper for coming on the podcast. Be sure to order a copy of Make Your Mark by going to our affiliate link, which is pushpullsales.com/makeyourmark. We will also include show notes and links to all of Coyte's great resources at pushpullsales.com. Thank you to bensound.com for our intro and outro music, and thanks to you guys for listening. You can tune in next time where we'll tackle another topic. In the meantime, you can follow us on Instagram at pushpullsales. You could tweet us at pushpullsales. You can email us with any feedback, or if you'd like to come on the show, pushpullsales@gmail.com. And in addition, make sure that you're subscribing on iTunes so you don't miss any new episodes, and we will talk to you soon.